Hi there, my name is Mackenzie. I'm a public high school teacher in rural New Mexico. I teach English 11, AP Language, and AP Literature, but I've previously taught 10th grade English and 10th and 11th grade honors as well. And today I'm going to talk about how I plan a year-long course. For this, I am going to give sort of a disclaimer. This video is mostly for my own posterity. I want to make sure that I am sort of keeping in mind how I've planned my course in the past, because this school year, I don't really know what's going to be going on. So, taking that with a grain of salt, I'm going to be using AP Literature for this video, because I think that's an easier subject for me to talk about when I'm talking about how I frame a course, because it's my bread and butter. One of my beliefs is that AP courses sort of have served as a barrier for a really long time, and a lot of students don't get a chance to have access to that kind of curriculum, and it's also a really cost-heavy way for public school students to get access to more advanced curriculum. So the way that I plan my AP Literature class is actually how I structure my other courses as well. So I wouldn't say that this is just specific for AP. And also, your curriculum has to be tailored to the kids that are in your room. Nothing that I do you could perfectly copy and paste and make work for your kids. There's absolutely no way. So I think about my course, basically, I try not to feel so stressed about the quarter system or grading periods or anything like that, because anybody who works in a public high school knows that as soon as you plan for something, it's never going to happen. So I like to think way more loose with my structures, and I establish a lot of deadlines for curriculum and units and projects with my students. And sometimes that means that I assign a project in one quarter and it's not due till the next quarter. And that's fine. That's my philosophy about it. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when I'm talking about my yearly plan, is that while there are units and there are specific sections of my class, I really am not planning with a grading period in mind, mostly because I don't really care about grades, and I don't really care about structuring my class around grades or tests or anything like that. So I basically ignore it when I'm doing my curriculum planning. I structure my class around 3 ideas. Basically, when you enter my classroom, I am going to introduce material for the purpose of you becoming the character. What I mean by becoming the character is that is the easiest way to access new literature. A lot of students in my school, this is the first time they're ever reading a novel all the way through in a class. We focus on becoming the character, understanding characterization, understanding turn of phrase, understanding development, emotional progress. That's how I start off the first portion of my course. The next portion of my course, which usually goes through the winter break time, and so it straddles maybe 2 different calendar years, is becoming the critic. In high school literature classes, often we don't introduce students to the tools that they need to respond critically. What I mean by that is that we give them really specific questions that they need to answer. So like, I love using this example because I hate teaching this book, but To Kill a Mockingbird, right? A lot of teachers use that book in a really, really narrow lens to talk about racism in America. And that is the narrow lens that you can use. When also what you could be using is you could be talking about what does it mean to be critical of an author, writing about experiences of people different than her. What is it like to look at the character of Scout and the gender roles? What does it mean to read a work of historical fiction, but not talk about the actual factual history surrounding it, or things like that, right? So we give We give students a piece of literature that can be analyzed critically, like all media can, but we don't just give them the tools and say, have at it, right? So if you think about it kind of like an art class, there's two ways that you can approach an English course. You can tell students your medium you're working in is acrylic paint and your project is due next week. And that means they have to do an acrylic paint project by that next week or they fail that project. They're wrong. They did it wrong. But we all know that there's not one right way to read a book or to respond to a book or to write an essay. We know this. So you have to think about it more like, what would it be like to teach an art class and be like, okay, today I'm going to teach you how to use acrylic paint. Tomorrow I'm going to teach you how to use clay. The next day I'm going to teach you how to do this. And then on Thursday, we're going to watch a movie, and then you can pick any medium you want, either one of the ones we've studied or something else, and respond to that movie in a way. Do you see kind of the framing like that? So that's what I mean about becoming the critic. So I spend the majority of my course time introducing students to critical lenses and critical theory, whether that's gender theory or archetypal or Marxist, critical race theory, introducing them to various different ways to look at a text and critically respond to it, instead of just doing what I use at the beginning of the class, which is trying to identify or not identify with the character or understand characterization. Because what that happens is, you probably have seen this in your classroom, is you say, I agree with them. I agree. I disagree. I didn't like that character, right? And so that kind of gets outside of those discussions.
Hi, quick pause. I think I was rambling a little bit. What I mean to say is that when you give kids multiple ways to access a text, when you're having discussions about it, you're not limited to that normal class discussion where kids just say, I agree, I disagree. Okay, back to the video.
Then, the last part of my class is become the teacher. So now that they understand like the basic bones of literature, like plot and character, tone, theme, point of view, all of those things, then when they understand how to engage critically, or they have tools to engage critically, and we practice a lot with using them, and how there's not necessarily a right or wrong way to use them, and it's okay to kind of stumble through them when you're learning. And me too. I do have a master's degree in curriculum, but I'm not the expert on every single thing that's ever been thought about. My text selection is very restricted to what I had available in the book room, which hadn't been updated in 10 plus years, maybe more than that, the last time they had funding. Pretend you're now a teacher creating a class. Or even better, like pretend you're a professor creating a college course. What would you teach? How would you teach it? And then literally try teaching it. So what this challenges students to do is not only do they have to work on their presentation skills and things like that, but they have to get out of the mind of the student and think about, what does it mean to actually teach someone, or how do you know that someone has learned? So instead of looking at grades and scores as a way to know that you've learned something, now they're actually having to deal with that struggle of like, wait, I'm trying to teach this and I actually don't know it myself. So how do I solve that gap first? I've done this a few different ways. My favorite is, like I mentioned earlier, having them create a course like they're a professor. So you have to teach a class about literature. You can pick any literature you want or any media you want. How are you going to teach it? What's the framework? What's the theme? So I had one student one year that she proposed like syllabus and everything and taught us a lesson. I actually have them teach a day. Like I set a day aside and they teach. And she taught us about, her whole thing was censorship. So she wanted to teach a course about censorship. So what does it mean to teach censorship? How do you teach something that has been taken away, right? What an interesting idea. And so she was like, well, I would start with these books, which are books that had been censored or banned, and bring up the question of why. So have my students read those books and then base all the discussions around why are they censored. right? She's kind of following my framework. Give them something to engage with. Why are the characters like this, but instead, why are the books censored? Then ask them to pick a book and censor it. And how? How would you censor it? Would you censor something nonsensical to like prove how odd censorship is? Would you censor something for the purpose of like almost making it more mysterious? Like think like a series of unfortunate events like Lemony Snicket, like who is this mysterious person that's referenced but their name is gone, things like that? Or would you censor things that are obviously adult so that you could teach it to younger kids because you could get away with it? Like thinking about that as a construct and then having students actually come up with a proposal. So a proposal for a school or something like that to argue whether or not censorship should be allowed. This was a student that created that course. Amazing. And I mean, that's just one example. Students came up with many awesome things, but it's a different kind of critical thinking, right? So it's not just being able to read a book and remember what happens in every chapter. It's being able to approach any subject and be okay engaging with it and feeling confident enough that you can engage in it in some way. And that's sort of the narrative shift, right? So I'm going to sort of have a part 2 to this video where I'm going to talk about specifically the text that I use. I'm going to record it, but I don't know if it's going to be, I don't know if it'll be helpful. So I think I might just record it and post it just for myself anyways. Because like I said, I don't know if I'll ever have access to these books again. I don't know that anyone else would have access to this exact set of text, so it's kind of more just like for myself. So anyways, hopefully this gives you some ideas on how you can think about your classroom too.